Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some r/TraumatizeThemBack for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading the post, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Shan Began. Why does she get to work from home and I can't? At my job, we're supposed to be in the office a couple of days a week. I am in almost every day as that's my preference, while others stick to their work from home days. Quite strictly, which is also fine. But I have one colleague who I work with closely that previously came into the office but now gets to work from home full time. And I'll add, she is great at her job and a joy to work with. Slowly, it was noticed by a few people that she was never in the office and they started making comments how it was strange. She was lucky. Must have found a reason for an exemption. Has a special arrangement. They would look at me and wait for me to say something negative or complain, but I wouldn't say much other than, she works from home due to personal reasons, as it's not my info to share with others. And she's always available virtually if people need to meet or chat about a project. We were having a larger teams meeting recently, and one of these nosy Nancys raised it in a passive-aggressive way, saying how she hasn't seen her in ages, and she's always at home, and it would be great to see her in the office sometime, as their team all have to be in a couple of days a week. I sat there, sipping my tea, while my coworker dropped the bomb that her husband has been having seizures due to a rapidly growing brain tumor and he can't be left alone. She went on to add how she wishes she could get out of the house more, but she can't even leave for a coffee or groceries unless one of the kids is home, or she can get a friend/family member to stop by, and that the other option was to go on leave, but felt it would be a burden to the team and she can still get the work done from home. Let's just say the horrified looks people had in awkward silence has ensured that hasn't come up since. I'm going to keep my opinions of the post limited to pretty much the coworkers should have just minded their own business and not pressed OP's coworker on why she was on essentially work from home schedule. But I will use this opportunity to talk about the fact that I think that companies banning you from working from home, especially if your job is entirely capable of being fulfilled from home, I think that's a scam and they just want to keep renting out their business complex and need to force employees to come back to work to justify it. Because all the data shows that companies that can allow their employees to work from home actually do a lot better both in profit, employee satisfaction, employee happiness, employees save a ton of money, they have a generally just better outlook on life, and I really do think that if you're capable of working from home and can produce equal if not more work from a home environment, you should be allowed to do so. Plus, it keeps cars off the road and prevents traffic. It's like literally just a universal win except for people that want to justify their massive business complexes. And not to mention, if you're getting all of your work done and there's no productivity issues, who the fuck cares what else you're doing on the clock? Seriously, if you're getting work done and productivity is the same, if not higher in a lot of cases for work from home companies, then it doesn't matter. Buzzy bee time. Cancer doesn't wait. Back when I was 14 in high school, I was diagnosed with skin cancer. Nothing really crazy, but it was caught early, and so removing it in an outpatient setting was the treatment plan. Now, I had the hard-ass type of teacher for my last period. Taught math and with a real stick-up-his-ass kind of guy. Enjoyed lecturing students for small things. For example, yawning wasn't allowed in his class because it's something you do when you're bored and is disrespectful. You get the picture. He really didn't like me because I wasn't doing well in his class and he took it as a personal front, I guess. Well, I ended up having to miss his class a couple of times due to procedures to remove the cancer, and he was livid. In front of the whole class, he told me, "You do not need to be missing my class with your grade this low. Pick a different class to miss." So, I, with stitches still on my arm and back, told him, "Sorry, I guess I'll just tell the cancer to wait next time." He went silent, didn't say a damn thing, and went back to teaching. He didn't yell at me in front of the class after that. Still was mean, but left me alone if I missed class for an appointment. See, these kind of teachers are the ones that do get under my skin, are the ones that will utilize your grade as a form of public humiliation. That just has never sat right with me in the slightest. And I had great grades. I was valedictorian in my class. Granted it was a class of 30 and it was one of 4, but still. I don't think grade shaming is the right way to approach a student who's struggling. That's not going to make them want to learn more, that's going to make them want to learn less. Good on the student for clapping back the way they did, but it's not very often that someone gets to use skin cancer as a trump card for when they're being humiliated publicly in front of everyone else. And it sucks too because math is beautiful. The problem is a lot of teachers will teach the methods and the formulas, but they won't teach the fundamental rules and logic behind it and how we came up with those formulas and how we actually got to where we got. I had a calc teacher who didn't just teach the basic things to memorize for calculus, he actually taught us how calculus works and the basic fundamentals of it, to a point where, because I didn't have certain things memorized, I was actually able to understand and find the derivatives of a logarithm without having to use the cheat sheet, because I was able to actually build it from the ground up and understand how calculus worked, because the teacher was more focused on teaching us the methodology of it and not just making us cram and memorize random shit. A good teacher will not be able to teach every student because some students just don't want to learn. But a good teacher can turn a student who wants to learn but struggles to grasp the material into a student who excels at the material. And that's the important distinction. If it paid better to be a teacher, I'd want to be one. And that's kind of the sad part, honestly. Change your blinker fluid. Somebody at work didn't respect my out of office, so I let them know what I was doing. I work in tech as a project/program manager. It can be pretty fast-paced, and we deal with really big dollar, multinational projects all of the time, so I'm frequently called on at wild hours of the day. 2 years ago, while in her late 30s, my wife learned in pretty much the most horrifying way possible that she has a rare and serious lymphoma. Treatment required surgery, several rounds of inpatient chemo, and an allogeneic bone marrow stem cell transplant. As a result, I found myself the sole breadwinner for the family, her primary caretaker, and the primary parent of our 3 young kids. Almost everybody I work with have been incredibly supportive through this process. My boss and immediate leadership basically granted me as much paid time away from work as I needed, as they know I work my butt off all the time. I continued to work throughout her treatment, but I would often take 2 to 3 hours off during days where she has appointments or infusion. I would just put an out of office on my email and messaging apps and be there for my wife. One salesman didn't care. I guess his commission check was too big for him to let something like an alert that I'm out of office keep him from blowing up my messages about how he needs something urgently. I should have ignored my messages, but I responded that I'm out of office and would call him back later when I was available. He couldn't take no for an answer, so I answered his Teams call, with my camera on from the infusion room at the oncologist office, where my wife was sitting, bald and curled up in a ball with a combo of chemo, sick, and exhaustion from the BMT. He asked where I was. I told him, and suddenly the call was not urgent. Oh man, can you just call me back later? Wife is doing great, by the way. She said I should post this here because she thought it was funny. LOL. Honestly, because the wife seemed kinda game for it and actually enjoyed what the husband did, I would have just kept the salesman on the line and just made him extra uncomfortable. Like, no, you said this was urgent, so let's have the conversation. I'm not letting you get away from this phone call. You're gonna tell me exactly what was so urgent that you had to interrupt this doctor's appointment. And just really hammer it home and make him really uncomfortable. Because the thing is, if it was important, the salesman could have apologized and thanked him for taking time to actually hear what was so important, but because he was so quick to back down, it was probably some fucking bullshit that was related to his commission that he desperately wanted to get ahead on, and then realized pretty quick, oh fuck, my greed's gotten the best of me and now I'm an asshole. Also, fun tip, if you're ever dealing with a salesman that's like really getting in your skin and won't let you just walk away, just ask them if it's powered by crystals. It doesn't matter if they're selling you a car or a magazine, just ask them if it's powered by crystals. If they say no, just say, oh, that's a shame, I'm not interested, and then walk away. If they say yes, just say, oh, you're full of shit, okay, and then walk away. It works every time. Puzzle-headed girl 1300. Roommate said he's a measurement kind of guy. So we measured. Hello, I posted this in a different thread, but someone mentioned it would be better here. Background. I signed a lease with my friend and her boyfriend 6 months ago. My first time living alone, so I agreed to not have as much space because I essentially had no use for it anyway. Think me having 6 small cabinets out of 33 cabinets we have in the kitchen and not having anything in the living, dining area plus no counter space. I agreed to this with the exchange of being allowed to use their pots and plates. This arrangement worked mostly until her pig boyfriend took up all the space in the freezer, leaving me almost no space. Sorry I can't add images here, check my previous post for pics if you like. And here they are real quick, and oh my god, yes, look how fucking full that freezer is. And they also included a photo of the actual house, and this is actually, this gives me anxiety looking at this because if you know my past, oh god, And just real quick, if you want to live your life like this, that's entirely okay. I couldn't care less. Just don't subject others to it. That's the biggest thing that I would have to say. I reached out asking for a bit more space and I was left on scene for 2 days, so I did what everyone told me to do. Move their stuff out of the way to make space. Of course, she messaged me right after saying, "I'm like stuck in a middleman position once again. I know you said we can split top and bottom. Unfortunately, X's, her boyfriend, is an exact measurement split kind of guy, so he's choosing to measure that out himself. Wanted to communicate my position so you could understand and not think I'm being indifferent to either of you." I told them, fine, if we want exact measurement, let's do it for everything. Your man-child can't just pick and choose. 3 days later, and plenty of volume calculations thanks to my friend, I went from having 6 to 13 cabinets out of the 33 and more fridge and freezer space. She was trying to make some cabinets into shared space, even though I had nothing stored in them and won't in the future, so I made sure to question every single one and got more space. Only semi-con is that I have to buy my own pots and pans, but I was already planning on moving out, so it's not a big deal. What's even sweeter is catching her boyfriend trying to remeasure in the middle of the night through our security cam. I haven't gotten any text from her, so I guess he wasn't able to prove the numbers wrong. Now my only worry is making sure he stays within his lane, but of course I'm sure he can't complain because, well, numbers don't lie. Too long didn't read, roommate used up all the freezer space. I asked for a bit more space and was told he's a measurement kind of guy. So we measured, and now I have more than double the fridge, cabinet, and counter space than I used to have. Oopsie whoopsie. See, that's the thing with roommates, is if you have a very simple problem like fridge space or storage space, communication and trying to find mutual ground of understanding is always the way to go, because the moment you get petty and start being like, let's just measure it out then, there's a chance it may not go your way. And there's a chance that it may not go your way in such a point where you're now having your previous space allocated to you. Sometimes it's better just to bite the bullet and, hey, roommate wants a bit more freezer space? Sure, we can figure it out. Instead of being, well, this about it. I'm also mildly ashamed to admit that I thought this post was going to go a very different direction with it saying, he's a measurement kind of guy, so we measured. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Wisco Sherm, old people racism. A few decades ago, I worked for a very popular doll company. The dolls could be purchased over the phone. This was pre-internet. So during the Christmas season, everyone answered phones. I was on one day taking an order from a woman who lived in Mississippi. She was ordering a doll for her granddaughter. These dolls had backstories to them, and this particular doll was a dark-haired, brown-eyed girl who was an orphan during the Victorian times. She asked me if this particular doll was biracial. Only that's not the word she used. She used an older, obsolete term that is not complimentary. She was obviously concerned about this. I told her that these were all dolls, not actual human beings, and the storyline for this doll did not include being biracial. I then suggested to her that if racial purity was the most important thing to her, she might want to order the doll whose background was Scandinavian, because, as I put it to her in these exact words, Scandinavian men went around Northern Europe being women, and their women stayed at home and were impregnated only by other Scandinavians. And then I hung up the phone on her and took a break because that was just too much to deal with. Update, I never thought this would get so much attention. Nice to know so many people have fond memories of their dolls from a company I shall not name because I worked for them. The woman did end up ordering the Scandinavian doll and never caught the sarcasm and horror in my little history lesson. Even though this happened around 1987, it still haunts me, and being able to talk about it here was great. I can't even imagine being so, afraid of accidentally buying a biracial doll that upon hearing that a Scandinavian doll is a better choice because they're oftentimes more purebred, and she decides, yeah, that's what my granddaughter needs. You see, darling, this one's right because it's white and pure. No trace of any of those filthy minorities in there. Anyways, Merry Christmas, darling. I also hope that it's abundantly clear that I don't believe that, and that I'm making fun of the absurdity of what the grandmother did. I need to add the disclaimer there because last time I did a bit like this, some of you thought I was serious. Granted, this was also on the main channel several years ago, but it still haunts me to this day. In the boonies, N.E., so Nebraska. Curb your snark and learn to count change. I'm half Korean and grew up in the 80s in a state that is less than 4% minority. That checks out for it being Nebraska. When I was around 17, I was shopping in a local grocery store, and as I wandered through the aisles, I became aware from my peripheral vision of a stock clerk watching me as I passed. He was working in the aisle with a girl that had a cashier's smock on. I was aware of it, but didn't take any real note of it. Both of them seemed to be around the same age as me. The duo had moved to another aisle, and as I passed by the aisle, I heard the cashier say to the stock clerk in a super snide voice, "Oh look, there goes your little China girl." Jesus Christ. As it would turn out, this girl would be the same girl that was my cashier when I went to check out about half an hour later. I can't remember the exact amount of my purchase, but it was like $32.66, and I gave her $33.16 so I could just get, 50 cents back and not deal with getting pennies. She looked at me completely dumbfounded and said somewhat haughtily, "You gave me too much money." I replied in my most pleasant yet condescending voice, "No, let me help you here. We Asians are real good at math. You give me 50 cents back. And by the way, I'm Korean, not Chinese." The memory of the look on her very red face and her rushing to give me back my change without further questioning it, just to get me away from her, still brings me so much satisfaction. I really wish we were more privy to the rest of the conversation as to what could possibly prompt them to state what they did in a public aisle. Granted, it was the 80s, so I guess racism was more prevalent then, but still, there had to have been something to prompt that comment. It's just such a vile statement to make about someone you don't know. Also, just kind of as like a side note, because I used to do that when I paid with cash all the time, where I would give extra money specifically to avoid pennies and whatnot. Is that not a common thing to do? Like, I specifically did this so I could avoid getting pennies back and only get bills and quarters. And this was back when I was like maybe 12 or something, and I would use change to go and buy sodas and whatnot so my dad couldn't track it, because I wasn't allowed to have soda. Only problem was I was using quarters and bills from the family's change jar. I have a very awkward memory of one day my dad grabbed the jar and he's like, "I've been putting like quarters and pennies and all my change in here for about 5 years, so I can't wait to see how much there is." So he dumped it all in a Coinstar and got like maybe $20 out of it. And I just remember the long exalted, "I thought there would be more," because I had been fishing quarters out of there for the last 5 years. So to this day, he has no idea, but it is still just kind of funny. Truffle Lover 911. Vanilla sauce. I got this story from my coworker during lunch today because we were eating pancake with thick vanilla sauce. Oh god, you fucking Germans and your weird ass words. Kaiserschmarrn, for reference. Also, no shame to my German viewers. I only speak English, and I don't like words that scare me, alright? Which is essentially like 90% of your language. Anyway, this story happened 10 years ago. My coworker's name is Rose. She is Asian and grew up in a very typical Asian family and work environment. One day, she got married, and since the first month after her marriage, all of her big family's coworkers, neighbors were commenting about pregnancy. She is thin, but she is perfectly healthy. Typical comments: "When will you get pregnant? Have you started the program? Are you late?" Her period. "If you're thin, it'll take longer to get pregnant," etc. This is super annoying. One day, she was about to start a meeting with at least 10 other colleagues in a room. A noisy Nancy started a small talk by saying, "Oh, you're still super thin. Why don't you get pregnant soon?" Rose woke up and shows violence, and on this day said, "Yes, because my husband is so sweet, I like to keep it in my mouth." Nancy dropped her jaw, awkward silent. No comment from anyone. Rose just moved on with the meeting. No more noisy Nancy to her. I feel like this entire office is like a disaster for HR waiting to happen, because imagine asking your coworker casually, "Hey, have you and your husband started having unprotected sex yet? By the way, you're way too damn thin." Just what a train wreck waiting to happen. My guess would be, though, is Rose probably got so fucking tired of everyone asking her that she just eventually, in the shower one morning, figured out the perfect clapback response and was frothing at the mouth for the first opportunity to use it, and Nancy was victim number one. Also, something that like fundamentally bothers me is that in my head when I hear, "Oh, it happened 10 years ago," my brain jumps to like 2000 or 2005. And in reality, it's 2015. And I just kind of hate myself. Is this normal? Do other people who are like, older than 20 start to get their decades fucked up and forget that 10 years ago wasn't in fact like, early 2000s or maybe even the 90s for some people? It was actually like several decades ago? Or am I just time blind? Southern Donut 2495. Always yell back. This particular time, I was sitting at the back of a cab and I was coming back home after a long day. The cab driver dude was a little odd because he was twitching and getting irritated with other drivers and me. I think that should have been the first red flag, but I didn't notice because I was really tired. Anyway, thankfully, I reached home safely and I looked at the meter to pay, but this dude barked at me and told me I needed to pay 2 times the amount written on the meter, just because he said so. Of course, I say no because he can't change the rules like that, and he started yelling at me with tons of insults and threatening me to pay the amount. Thankfully, again, I got dropped near a crowded street, so I was relatively safe. Usually, I would have let it go, but not this time. I got really mad, so I screamed back at the top of my lungs and told him to talk to me properly, and I think in the heat of the moment, I also ended up telling him he has no manners for shouting and overcharging me, that he should be ashamed of himself, and asked him what his family would say if they saw him behaving like this at the top of my lungs, LMAO. Bro was so taken aback by that his anger was replaced by confusion. By that point, I realized his eyes were bloodshot. Now that I think about it, he must have been drunk or on drugs or something, so I promptly paid him the amount on the meter and left. He tried to shout at me again by threatening me, and I screamed back, telling him to shut the fuck up or I'll report him to the police if he keeps this up. For a second, I thought he sobered up a bit, because he ran with his tail between his legs. Needless to say, he won't be trying that with other people. The only possible justification that I could ever think about of double charging someone for the total cab time is if it's during rush hour or something like that and it's something that's clearly printed and labeled. But of course, that's just me trying to make sense of the situation. If you've ever seen something like this before, let me know in the comments because I don't live in a city that usually has cabs, so that's not really a common thing for us to see here. So let me know if there is some kind of standard practice that allows a cab driver to suddenly double the fare cost. But more importantly, if the cab driver was clearly on something, you probably should have reported him to the police. That's probably the first step you should have done when realized that he was essentially taxiing while intoxicated or under the influence of something, because that is putting a lot of people at risk and at danger. I'm happy that you made it out safely, of course, but just for future reference and to the audience as well, if you notice an Uber driver or a taxi driver or someone is very clearly under the influence of something, you should probably report it because they could end up hurting someone down the line or hurting themselves or hurting another passenger. So yeah, that's also probably why the taxi driver dropped it and sped off, because once he realized the police could get involved and he couldn't strong-arm his way with aggression to getting additional money, he probably realized he should get the fuck out of there. Also, as a general note, if you do think your cab driver is possibly tweaking on something, confrontation may not be the best of ideas. Just look at your situation, observe your surroundings, and try to figure out what the safest possible move for you to make next would be. Because you don't want someone who's high on something or tweaking on something or possibly intoxicating to suddenly amplify their violence against you because you yelled back. That's just a general recommendation towards you that I think could probably help prevent you from getting into more trouble than you signed on for. Lose Stan 5112. My fear of driving exams snowballed. I had my first driving test today and I felt well prepared in terms of the actual skills. As I was in the waiting room, I was really anxious and almost peed myself. We got into the car and my leg was shaking, but I drove on. Was doing perfectly until the 5-minute mark, where I swerved right and the car behind me overtook by speeding up, leading to the examiner physically holding the steering wheel. I knew then that I had failed, and from that point on, I could not think straight. I was missing exits, taking the wrong lanes, and completely distraught until the final straw. I almost ran a red light and the examiner had to brake. I literally started sobbing as I carried on driving. I had tears and boogers running down my face and was venting to him about how I didn't have the energy to carry on and how my lessons were going great. This was the outcome I least expected. The examiner looked so scared and uncomfortable. He asked me to pull over, and I continued sobbing and asking him if we could cut the test short, to which he agreed. I was driving fine after this, but crying like a fresh widow. I was saying my thoughts out loud about not being able to face my parents or instructor, and he would quietly say, "It's such a shame," or "I'm sorry about this," every few minutes whilst I was in hysterics. In the moment, I would have rather died, but in hindsight, it is hilarious. That man is gonna have a hell of a story to tell his family when he gets home. I'm not really sure why the poor driver instructor had to be traumatized back, but alright. But in all seriousness though, my biggest recommendation is, because I'm assuming you have your learner's permit, have your parents do mock driver tests with you. Start in a safe environment, start out with, maybe neighborhoods or just lower traffic roads just to get the feel of it and to build up your confidence, and then go to highways. And just do that a couple times until it becomes second nature, because a big part of it is you really want to be at a point where you are familiar and comfortable with the car and understand it. And also keep in mind, every car is a little bit different. So if you're hopping into a DMV provided instructor's car, then definitely take some time and just ask like, "Hey, can I get used to the car by just going around the parking lot a little bit to get familiar with how the car feels?" It's a great excuse just to get a little bit of breathing time in to get your nerves calmed down. And in my experience, my instructor let me do that. If yours doesn't, that's definitely a weird thing for him not to allow you to do that. But anyways, all of it is practice and just getting comfortable behind the wheel and just deep breaths. You'll get it eventually. And also, by the way, you are far from the first person that the examiner has seen freak out or do horrendous things, alright? A buddy of mine managed to end up in an irrigation canal. Trust me, it could be so much worse. I don't mean he crashed into it, I mean he somehow turned into the irrigation canal and ended up with the car just parked comfortably without damage in the irrigation canal. I don't know how. I saw pictures of it, so I know it happened, but still, it could be far worse. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code OZ at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code OZ directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code OZ at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.